Everyone, welcome to another Java Talks with devICT. devICT ran by Make ICT members. I'm sure most of you are kind of aware of what devICT is and what we do. We do have a code of conduct everybody should be aware of. Just be nice is basically the gist of it. You can get involved with devICT. We're on Slack. And you can just get an invite from devict.org, and then we have past presentations on the website as well, and then we post stuff about jobs. We don't actually have membership for devICT, but it does cost money to keep devICT up and running with hosting and servers and crap like that, and just little things we do. So donations are appreciated and helpful. Giving a talk is a really great way to get involved with devICT. Speaking a little selfishly here about Java Talks, since all you guys are here and interested in Java in some degree, to kind of keep this thing going, we'll have another one next month, again on the third Tuesday. So if any of you would like to talk about anything Java, you can contact me or Jacob or Seth and let us know what you'd like to do. I'll ping people in Slack and stuff, and then I've got tons of stuff I have no problems talking about, so if you guys want to deal with me doing it, that's fine. But it would be awesome if we had more participation, because we'll learn about more stuff that way. This is just a list of other groups that we're associated with here in Wichita. I'm pretty sure you guys have all seen that list before. We have some more upcoming events. Level Up is every other Monday. So the next one is the August 29th, and then the 12th and 26th. It's at the Make ICT Makerspace. Basically, you just show up, and there's mentors there, and you can ask them how to do stuff, ask them questions, and they'll.
Where's that at?
The Make ICT, yeah. Just east on Douglas. It's, I don't know the exact address off the top of my head, but it's before you get to the Hopping Gnome.
Yeah, it's before I trolled.
Yeah.
Okay. You know where Big Dog used to be? It's
just west of that, yeah.
1,500.
1,500. Okay. Code and copies every Thursday morning starting at 7 a.m. You just come here to the Labor Party and just work on side projects, work on work, talk to other people. There's people always hanging out here at that time.
There may be Minecraft.
There may be Minecraft.
Fair warning.
Okay.
Some Thursdays, Brian plays Minecraft.
There's a monthly hangout that's every second Tuesday. The next one will be September 13th. That varies on what, sometimes it's games, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's, you know, who knows what.
That's
just kind of a,
right?
that's here.
It used to be Nerd Beers.
Right, it's just social gathering. And then this obviously is Java Talks every Thursday, Tuesday. The next one will be September 20th. So if anybody would like to sign up for that, let me know. Let me know what you want to talk about. We'll get it scheduled. The next devICT monthly talk, which is on Thursday nights, is Scary JavaScript That Tracks You Online from Luke Crouch. He's actually works at Mozilla, so that should be a pretty interesting talk as well. And then tonight's event is Kotlin, and presented by Jacob Moore.
When Greg said to talk to him or Jacob or Seth, he meant Jacob Walker, not actually. Yeah, I guess I can send you to the right person. Okay, hi. So this is my presentation about Kotlin, from Russia with love, the syntax. Hi, I'm Jake. I'm a junior developer at Appliance Technologies. We do custom Windows virtualization for companies who need a server-client relationship accessible from anywhere. I've been there for a year and a half. I transitioned from the support department, totally self-taught, other than online courses, etc. Very little formal programming education. Tell you a little bit about myself. This is my wife, Katie. She's here. I love her. We'll be celebrating our first wedding anniversary on the 5th of September, so that's fun. Yeah. You can cheer or hiss as your situation warrants. I love my cats. We have 4 cats. The one on the right is a recent adoption. He was a stray that would not leave the house we moved to, and so eventually there was a water bowl, and then there was a food bowl, and then the cow was in the house. And it's kind of how it goes. Toxoplasmosis. And I love competitive games. So my main hobby is that I've been running a competitive Magic the Gathering league for the last 3 years or so. And then I participate pretty consistently in local and regional Street Fighter tournaments. So plug out my big arcade stick. And if any of you lead lives as exciting as mine, you may find yourself on a Sunday night watching ESPN2 looking for lumberjack competition or some old karate or something. And recently you may have actually seen Street Fighter on ESPN. There's a big event in Vegas every summer, and they broadcast the top 8 of that tournament on ESPN. Like video games on television, it's not as crazy as it used to be. Some people don't like it, but it's ESPN2. Like, what's on ESPN2 on a Sunday night? I don't really know. I don't watch ESPN. But like, you guys aren't here to listen to me ramble on about how action-packed my home life is. You're here for a Java talk, and I will provide one for you. I'm here to talk about Kotlin, which is it's a concise, pragmatic, statically typed language that runs on the JVM. And I'll cover all of those things individually before long. But first, I want to provide a little history. In 2011, JetBrains, who the makers of IntelliJ IDEA, one of the, I would say, big 2 or 3 Java IDEs. Among other things, they make a really useful plugin for Visual Studio called ReSharper that has helped us at Appliance with our C# code base quite a bit. Despite being expensive, it's worth it. Anyway, they undertook a survey of all the languages on the JVM and found that none of them really accomplished what it is that they wanted. None of them really overcame some specific limitations of Java that they were looking for. So therefore, they determined that they needed their own language. So the St. Petersburg office of JetBrains started a team and named the language after this island, which sits off of the coast of St. Petersburg, Kotlin Island. They developed completely in the open. Everything's hosted on a GitHub repo. And in February of this year, the team declared the language ready for a 1.0 release. The goals of the project, briefly, are to have full Java interoperability, to compile as quickly as Java, and to be safer than Java, more concise than Java, but at the same time, easier to learn than Scala. Specifically, they mentioned easier to learn than Scala. I became aware of Kotlin a couple of months ago because of a Medium post by this guy, Mike Hearn. He used to work at Google and left Google to work on the blockchain and on Bitcoin, which, you can judge that decision as you will. But he wrote a post on Medium called "Why Kotlin is My Next Programming Language," and he kind of detailed and highlighted several things about the language that really interested me, including a lot of stuff that I'm going to cover tonight. I found his case persuasive enough that I picked up the tutorial and started working through the reference docs, and it started gears turning in my head about how I could use Java, how I could use Kotlin in my personal project as well as in my day job. The creators of Kotlin and the maintainers of Kotlin repeatedly use the same 3 verbs to describe the language. They call it pragmatic, concise, and safe. And like a true Kotlin dev, I decided not to reinvent the wheel, and I'm centering the more technical parts of my talk around these 3 words. So first, we'll talk about pragmatism. Kotlin, from the very beginning, was written to be designed to be very strongly interoperable with Java. You can write Kotlin that calls into Java classes or Java methods, and then vice versa. You can write Java that will call directly into Kotlin with just one import. The JetBrains, they also wrote a converter tool for IDEA, where you can take a Java class or a Java file and paste it into IDEA, and it will say, "Hey, this looks like Java. Would you like to convert this to Kotlin?" And it does it. It actually works. If you're having difficulty expressing something in Kotlin, you could write it the way you would write the equivalent Java code and use that tool, and you'll get Kotlin code that compiles. It's probably not going to be the most idiomatic Kotlin code, which we'll cover later in the talk, but it does allow for an easier transition to the language. Excuse me. So Kotlin compiles a Java bytecode that's compatible with Java 6 forward. So if you're an Android developer, or if your specific deployment makes upgrading to a newer JVM difficult, it's possible to get access to a lot of the features that are present in Java 8 and 9, like lambdas, for instance, while using Kotlin. And I will say here that the Kotlin team is working on targeting Java 8 and 9, and a lot of things that are in those versions of the JVM do work in Kotlin, like streams, for instance, are already accessible in Kotlin. And as you'd expect from a language written by an IDE producer, their tooling is first class. Code is, there's the obvious things, like you can autocomplete and refactor your Kotlin methods the same way that you would Java. But you can also combine Java and Kotlin files into the same project, and it's relatively trivial. You can also debug and step through these projects without any difficulty. And like the feeling that you get the first time that you step from a Java method into a Kotlin file is a little hard to describe. It's like reading a Stephen King novel in middle school. Like you're not really supposed to do it. Like it doesn't feel like you're supposed to do it. Like it feels a little like you're sitting in the aisle of the library and reading Cujo or something and going, oh my God, what is this? What is this crazy man? So continuing with pragmatism, there's no one way to write Kotlin. It's not a language like Go where there's a very top-heavy kind of influence on the language from the creator. The JetBeans team allows the mixing of like imperative style and functional style very, very easily. This allows developers like me, who's less familiar with the functional paradigm, to kind of dip our toes in that water. So you can apply higher order functions to your functions without necessarily feeling like you have to learn Scala or learn Haskell or anything of that nature. This is going to sound like a criticism, but Kotlin doesn't do anything particularly novel. Like there are lots of languages that can combine a functional and imperative style, or that hide auto-generated code, or even that compile to JavaScript. And the team has no qualms about admitting that they've cribbed most of their features from a variety of different languages like Ruby and Groovy and Scala. But what they have done is they've combined these elements into a pretty small package that's very easy to read and write and understand. And speaking of small things, let's talk about concision. The Kotlin runtime is tiny. The standard library and the runtime combined is less than a megabyte. So they use so keeping with the principle of full interoperability, they use as many of the Java standard libraries as possible. For instance, like collections, they don't have their own Kotlin collections library. They just use the Java library and write extension functions to do Kotlin things. This means that adding Kotlin to your code base adds little to no runtime overhead. This is especially important for Android developers, as every piece of storage means a lot. And so the Kotlin team focuses on Android as well. They're working to make intelligent reductions to their standard library, even though it's as small as it is, by reducing internal methods without changing the external functionality of the code. So Kotlin has a lot of features that kind of take care of boilerplate and some repetitive code, the things that feel like the real heavy lifting of Java. So let's take a look at this Java class. It's very straightforward. It's just a class. We've got a couple of fields there, a constructor, and 2 getters. Like this class doesn't actually do anything. It just stores that data. So I took this exact class and pasted it into IDEA, and let's see what this class looks like in Kotlin. That's it. Don't be alarmed. That is the entire class. Everything that we were just looking at back here is still there. Kotlin just generates it for you behind the scenes and allows you to only see it when you need access to it. A couple of things to notice here. The val keyword. So Kotlin uses val and var to differentiate between mutable and immutable types. So values cannot change, so you'll just use an instance of that value. But variables, obviously, mutable. So that allows for the functional style to be pretty easy to replicate. It's not Haskell, but it's pretty much as close as they've said they're going to get. So this, give me just one, sorry. So there's another modifier. If we add data, if we define this class as a data class, it generates some other methods for us. Oh, sorry. Let me go back one. So this also would, if these were variables, this would generate setters for us as well. It generates getters, setters, the constructor, all that stuff. Now, if we refer to it as a data class, that gets us a few extra things. It gets us an equals method. It gets us a two-string method, a hash code method, and a couple other smaller things. Another example of by how hiding the boilerplate and kind of generating it automatically, Kotlin allows us to kind of jam out these classes pretty quickly and allow us to focus on what's truly important, browsing Hacker News and R programming. I'm kidding, obviously. I don't do that at work. So let's take another example. This is a Java function. You may quibble with some of the numbers, but we're taking in a temperature in Fahrenheit and outputting a pair of values based on that input. So if the temperature is less than 32 degrees, we're going to call that freezing and assign blue. Oh, the color value is it's an enum that's just like a set of a bunch of different colors. So we got freezing, blue, mild, yellow, hot, orange, etc. Now, I tried to do this with a switch case in Java. It wasn't that easy to do inequalities with a switch case. So I kind of stuck with this, and it fits my example a little better. So in just a second, after I take a drink of this water, we're going to convert it to Kotlin and see what happens. OK. Well, that was uneventful. This is basically the exact same code. It's just a good example of how the Java to Kotlin converter will give you code that compiles in Kotlin, but it's not always going to be idiomatic or kind of Kotlin style. So let's see what we can do to this. The first thing we can do is that we're calling description and color in every single one of those if statements. What Kotlin allows us to do is use a construct called a pair. A pair is it's just a data class that contains two values, and it doesn't assign any inherent meaning to it. Any two values can fit into it. It's just a generic tuple. So since we're returning a pair, we can declare our returns as pairs. So you'll notice that there aren't any return statements on those ifs. In Kotlin, if is an expression, not a statement, so we'll always return a value. So we don't need a return statement. So for this reason, there's no ternary operator in Kotlin where you'll get a parentheses with condition and a question mark, and then the if-else, the one-liner if-else function. That doesn't exist in Kotlin because if has to be an expression. So this is better. It's a little more concise. We're not repeating ourselves as much, but there's a couple more things we can do to bring this into a slightly more Kotlin-like state. So let's look at those types in the value in the second line. Oh, the other thing we did was that we combined those. I apologize, I missed that. So since we're returning pairs, we can combine our values at the top into one set. So those types, we really need them. Kotlin is a statically typed language, so every expression has a type, but the compiler is very, very good at type inference. It's very good at inferring types for you. So what we can do is that for the vast majority of the time, we can just omit those types. We can just forget them because it'll see the output that it's getting and infer the type based on that. You can obviously explicitly define them if you want. The code will still compile, or if you have a personal preference or for readability. But the vast majority of the cases, types can be omitted. So now we're left with this. Now, some of you may have been sitting here and thinking, you know, why haven't you done a switch case yet? And you're right, mostly. Kotlin doesn't have a switch case exactly. We use a statement called when to handle a switch operator. So let's take a look at that. So this we can work with. We've got syntax similar to a switch case with this right-hand arrow being our assigner. You'll notice that there aren't as many parentheses or semicolons are fully optional in Kotlin. I imagine it's something like Go where when it compiles to bytecode, it will put the semicolons in for you. So,
Question.
yes.
You don't have to go back to the slide, but speaking about getting rid of the types.
Yes.
You can go ahead. If you put in an integer to a string for value in a pair, or one of those else is, the pilot complain about that, or you get that?
You know, I don't know. It's a very good question. I can pop open the IDE afterward and find out for you. I hope it would. It might just cast it.
If you typed it, I imagine it would.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It might say, hey, this isn't what I expected. Okay. So we're using this when operator. It's very similar to a switch case, so in degrees less than 32, et cetera. But the other thing that I've done here is that I've removed our pair construct, and I'm using this to. So to is all it is, and I've actually I pasted the bytecode here. So to is an infix function that just defines to, and it takes the values on either side and puts them in a pair. That's literally all it does. So it just makes this syntax a little more what's the word? It's readable to an English speaker. Like it's not.
And you only have two. You only have two choices, or could you have another two to a C value?
So
color, size.
Yeah, there is a Kotlin does have a triple value as well, which is the same concept, just with three internal values instead of two. Any larger than that, you want to use a different data structure. So it took a little bit of work, but we've turned this Java code, admittedly probably a little suboptimal, into some nice idiomatic Kotlin. So finally, let's talk about safety. I work with a lot of older Java code in my day job. Can you guess, out of all of the exceptions in Java, which exception gives me the most trouble? I'm sorry?
Runtime exception? Well,
yeah, I mean, the null pointer exception is specifically the one I'm referring to, the so-called billion-dollar mistake. I think that's a little overblown, but I'm not the biggest fan of hyperbole. So, nonetheless, it can be a major pain, a major thorn at a logics. Because of our tight connections to Java, we can't do away with a null reference the same way a language like Haskell or Erlang does. And even those have to account for nothing sometimes. Therefore, the Kotlin team took a different approach. They took a more modern approach where they check for null reference problems at compile time rather than runtime. So let's look at exactly what I mean. So here's we've got a couple of strings here. String 1 can never be null, it's just a regular string. String 2, we're using this question mark operator to indicate that this value can be null. So we would call that a nullable type. That's a similar, there are annotations for nullable and non-nullable in C# and in Java even. So that S1 dot, if we call the length of that first string, will that compile? Will the compiler like that? Probably, right? Because it has a value, it can never be null. Will the second one compile? No. It will say, hey, this could be null, therefore it can't do anything with this. But the developers of Kotlin give us several ways to handle these. So we've got this same value here, the string. The first thing we can do, the most obvious thing we can do, is that we can explicitly check check the value for just a regular non-nullable string. This is a feature that they call smart casting. You can do the same thing, like once you check the type up here, and you've confirmed to the compiler that it either is that type or isn't, you can treat it inside of the statement totally as if it's a string or an integer or something of that nature. The preferred way, so this actually will get a refactoring note. It's not a warning, but it'll give you that little light bulb. And what it'll ask you to do is to, instead of doing this explicit check here, we're going to do what's called a safe call operator. We're going to use this the question mark operator again as we call the length. And so this would return an integer if it's not null. This will return a nullable integer, an int question mark. I believe this construct here is borrowed from Groovy. Okay. Yet a third way we can handle nullable types is with something called the Elvis operator. I didn't really understand this until you look at that guy sideways. It looks like he's got the kind of wavy pompadour type thing. So we're going to check the length, and if it's null, we're going to give it this default value. Alternately, we can just throw an exception on purpose with this fail case and else return the length. Or we have this double exclamation point operator, which says, I don't care, just let me have an MP if I want one. So, and they let you do that. They give you 2 exclamation points to let you know that they don't want you to do that, and maybe you shouldn't do that. But if you know you're right, then you can do it. So under the hood, when this compiles to Java bytecode, like it just uses the nullable and non-nullable annotations. Like it's pretty straightforward. So you will see, if you look at compiled Kotlin bytecode, there are tons of these annotations, like they're everywhere. But fortunately, we don't look at the bytecode that often. IDEA does have a cool feature where if you want to look at a function or a method, you can, like with one keystroke, you can click through the bytecode and see exactly what it is underneath. That felt revolutionary to me, but I'm pretty new at this, so don't know everything yet. So those are the kind of the big 3 things: precision, safety. So before I wrap up, I want to cover, do quick hits on a few other things that Kotlin has, but I didn't really, I either didn't feel confident enough or didn't have the prep time necessary to do a deeper dive on some of these things. So higher order functions, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Kotlin implements quite a few higher level functions, higher order functions, excuse me. So map, filter, reduce, all of the kind of typical roster are available. Lambdas are supported, even though we're targeting Java 6. It actually converts those methods into an imperative style when it compiles them to bytecode. As well, we can also inline higher order functions if you guys are familiar with that concept. The concise syntax of Kotlin, excuse me, and the support of things like C# style extension functions and operator overloading give Kotlin a leg up when it comes to like internal domain-specific languages. So DSLs exist in Kotlin for Android UI development. There's a library called Anko that handles that. SQL database manipulation. That's actually a JetBrains internal library called Exposed. There's also HTML generation, so you can write your websites in Kotlin and just have them output HTML, which is really sweet to me. There are, there's a surprising amount of library support for a language that's only been around since 2011. There's build frameworks, documentation engines, dependency injection engines, like testing libraries, basically everything under the sun. Like you're not going to get the fire hose of stuff that you would when you're searching for Java or C# or something. What does Kotlin look like moving forward? Kotlin's developers have pretty big aspirations for the language. They're aiming to improve Kotlin's internal support in IDEA itself, the tooling support inside, specifically with Java frameworks like Spring and Gradle. And in fact, today, Gradle 3.0 was released, which has its first its first official implementation of Kotlin build scripts in Gradle. So you can write your Gradle build scripts in Kotlin and get access to a lot of the tooling that IDEA would provide you. What else? They're also working on supporting Android lint checks. I don't know if there's any Android devs here, but more and more code violations come up through the linting process in Android, and it's very important for those devs to have access to that in the IDE before they deploy. So the last thing that I'll cover in the coming soon section is that early on in its development, an attempt was made to make Kotlin compile to JavaScript, and it does work. It's an experimental phase. And it was backburnered in order for them to prioritize the 1.0 release, but they've put some resources back on it, and they've returned to dormancy. And they're like, I watched a talk from a guy from the lead developer, Andrei Breslov, and he said, he kind of laughed and said that, you know, there's not just one tool chain for JavaScript, there are tool chains, and we will support as many of them as is feasible. So probably like Node and Gulp and some of the bigger ones will get the main support. So if you like this talk and you kind of want to like learn Kotlin, there's a ton of resources. Like obviously it's the age of the MOOC. Like there's tons of online courses, et cetera, et cetera. The first thing I would try is try.kotlinlang.org. That's JetBrains website. It's totally free. It has an online like mini IDE, so like you don't have to install anything. There's a basic syntax walkthrough, and then there's the Kotlin koans, which are kind of more for Java devs coming to Kotlin. It allows them to explore some of the Kotlin-specific features and kind of try to solve some Kotlin-specific problems that might, like a Zen koan, might trigger some new knowledge or some enlightenment. Kotlin in Action is a book. It's from Manning Publishing. It's one of those in-progress books. There's like 11 or 12 chapters done. It's normally $35. It's aimed more at Java developers and less at kind of beginning devs. But with that code 39 Gemarov, you can get that for $21. And I actually highly recommend it. I'm working through the book currently myself, and it's very well written and it has a lot of for being written by two people who have English as a second language, it's surprisingly like it's surprisingly easy to understand, and they write things in a very grokkable way. That's the way I would describe it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the word grok, but it's very easy to kind of understand and grasp the wholeness of. And then obviously if you want a traditional MOOC, there's Udemy. They have the Kotlin programming course. I haven't taken that myself, but it is aimed at people who are new to software development in general. You don't have to have Java-specific knowledge. You don't have to have any knowledge. That course is normally $50, but I scraped a coupon code from his blog, Amazing Readers 25. You should probably read his blog, but I'd rather save you $25 if you want to get this course. And again, that's on Udemy. So what I would say is that if you want to learn Kotlin, just get involved. There's a Slack at kotlinslacken.herokuapp.com. Kotlin is a growing but still relatively small language. There's a lot to do, and the team welcomes contributors. Their GitHub repo is up there. They have lots of open issues and a good documentation about how to contribute and exactly what it is that they're looking for. According to that page, specifically the JavaScript translation bits are where they could use the most help. So if you're a JS guy and also a Java guy, or person, excuse me, it might be worth your time to look at that and get the chance to contribute to a growing open source project. There's also Keep, the Kotlin evolution and enhancement process. This is a pretty new thing. It's essentially like it's a big request board essentially where proposals will come in from the Kotlin team and from contributors and from just random developers who are using Kotlin, and folks can talk it's a GitHub repo, so you can talk inside the individual issues and kind of work things out and promote certain things, etc. That's kind of in beta, but they're looking to move more of their design process to that external site. Excuse me. And as a relatively new developer, spent the vast majority of my time writing code in languages that feel like very set in their ways, kind of monolithic, like owned by Oracle or Microsoft or Richard Stallman or they're very monolithic things. They're kind of slow to change and slow to act. But it's really refreshing to kind of be part of a community where I feel like an individual developer's use case can make a substantive difference in the course of a language's evolution. And I personally find that really, really cool. So what I would say is the coolest thing you can do with Kotlin is to use it in production. It converts from Java pretty easily. You could write some tests with it on a section of your code that doesn't have tests, or take a small piece of Java that you have ownership of and convert it to Kotlin and just kind of see what happens. You'll be learning a lot with not a lot of risk, and potentially contributing, maybe an important use case or an important bug report or something of that nature to the development of the language. So I started to make a slide for sources and references, but I had a lot of stuff, and it got really ugly. And I didn't want 3 slides of just links that you can't see, you can't interact with, except like with taking a picture with your phone. So on my GitHub repo, github.com/jmmore, you can go to the Java Talk repo, and there's a sources file with everything I accessed talk. So there's talks and articles and videos and slides from old presentations, old blog posts, et cetera, et cetera. There's one specifically that I want to cover that's not in my slides, but it's called Functional Programming with Kotlin. It's by the guy Mike Hearn, whose picture I had up earlier. It's like a 35-minute webinar, basically. And it's just him in an IDE just showing how to use these different functional processes and how to code in Kotlin in a functional way. He ends up using some imperative code. He uses the Streams API instead of a map, where he could use a map, and got some flack for it from an online viewer, but programmers will be that way. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I found it a very interesting intro to functional programming from a person who's basically only done imperative programming and bash scripting. Mike has a way with words of expressing these kind of what feel like very foreign concepts of a map or a filter or a function that takes in a function as an argument. I'm like, what the hell is that? He broke it down in like a 1 or 2 sentence description that I'm going to go back and write down and repeat to people because it's very, very easy to kind of grasp, again, the wholeness of. So that's it. Thank you guys for listening. There's some of my contact information. I'm on Twitter as jmmore_. I've never said that out loud before. It's kind of funny. I'm on GitHub at jmmore and then jmmore.tech, which is where this talk is hosted. I'll be posting these slides on my GitHub page as well. So I guess before I wrap, are there any questions, any thoughts? I didn't intend to get very technical. I wanted to kind of because I'm not that deeply experienced with Kotlin myself, I wanted to be more of an evangelist and kind of give an overview of some of the neat features and some of the reasons I would as a Java developer, I would go to a language like Kotlin. So if there are any questions, grievances, complaints?
I was going to ask, any like any major players who are actually using Kotlin in production? Or
Yeah.
are there any the open source projects one can go to check out to see some production worthy Kotlin code?
So I don't know about open source projects, but I can tell you, I have a list, in fact, of I didn't find a place for it in my talk, but I did find a list of folks who are using Kotlin in production. Netflix, Amazon, NBC. JetBrains has 500,000, over 500,000 lines of Kotlin in IDEA, and some of the newer modules of Kotlin have actually, or some of the newer modules in IDEA, excuse me, have been written entirely in Kotlin, which to me is really cool. Let's see, Basecamp, Expedia, Netflix, Square. As far as prominent open source projects that use Kotlin, I don't actually know. There's a GitHub repo in my sources page that has a list of Kotlin resources. It has libraries, projects, intros, all the courses you can think of. And I'll actually pull that up now. Greg, you had a question?
I just had a comment.
Sure.
One of the kind of big gotcha that you don't aware of was Kotlin when I very first started looking into it. You know, talking about using stock was Kotlin classes are final by default.
Yes.
So you have to use the open keyword to make them not final. So if you're trying to extend classes in Kotlin, it's not working. It's probably because you didn't use the open keyword. That'll bite you in the butt really quickly. So
Sorry. Yeah, that was a pretty important like architectural thing that I just missed. Yeah.
there's a really good, if you look it up, there's a really good discussion on Kotlin's GitHub issues about why they chose to do that and everybody complaining about it.
Awesome. Good. All right. Well, thanks very much, guys, for coming out.